Get on your knees and sew the damn hem, or I will call every headhunter in Manhattan and torch your career before the wedding march starts. My father's fingers dug into my bicep hard enough to bruise. He wasn't asking. He was blackmailing me 5 minutes before my sister walked down the aisle. Do you hear me? He roared, shaking me. Fix it. Now. I didn't blink. I didn't beg. I simply reached into my clutch, pulled out a thick cream envelope, and held it out to him. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope and how it destroyed his life in 30 seconds, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Richard snatched the envelope from my hand with a sneer that curled his lip. He didn't look at the contents immediately. He just waited in his palm, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a man who thought he'd just broken a wild horse. Finally coming to your senses? He spat, tapping the envelope against his other hand. I assume this is an apology letter, or maybe a promissory note for when you inevitably fail out of that program and need rent money? Brittany giggled from the vanity, applying a final layer of lip gloss. God, Farah, you're so dramatic. Just say you're sorry so we can take the photos. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just watched his hands. Richard tore the flap open with a violent rip. He pulled out the single slip of paper inside. He unfolded it, expecting a handwritten plea for forgiveness. Instead, he froze. The color drained from his face, leaving it a blotchy, pale gray. He stared at the paper. Then he squinted, as if the numbers were a foreign language he couldn't translate. $28,400? He whispered. Every penny, I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the room like a scalpel. That is the exact amount you paid for my freshman fall semester 4 years ago. The only semester you paid for. Richard looked up, his eyes darting between me and the certified cashier's check. Confusion warred with rage. He couldn't process the shift in power. For 4 years, he had dangled that single semester over my head, claiming he put me through school, claiming I owed him my life, my obedience, and my dignity. He had built an entire kingdom of control on a $28,000 foundation, and I had just bought the land out from under him. Where did you get this? He demanded, his voice rising again. Did you steal it? Did you take out a loan in my name? I almost laughed. It was pathetic. He looked at me and saw a struggling student, a desperate girl living on ramen and fear. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him was a lead quant developer for one of the most aggressive hedge funds in Greenwich. He didn't know I made that check amount in a single month of bonuses. He didn't know I had been building algorithms that moved millions while he was busy picking out tie colors for this circus. It doesn't matter where I got it, I said, stepping closer. What matters is that the debt is canceled. You don't own my tuition. You don't own my degree. And you certainly don't own me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The leverage was gone. The threat he used to force me into submission to make me his shadow planner. His punching bag. His servant had evaporated. He looked at the check, then at me. His fingers tightened on the paper. He made a move to rip it in half. Don't, I said. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. That is legal tender. If you destroy it, you're just burning your own money. And knowing your financial situation, Richard, I don't think you can afford to burn 28 grand. His hand stopped. The vein in his forehead throbbed. He shoved the check into his pocket, his greed winning over his pride for a split second. You think this changes anything? He hissed, stepping into my personal space. You think you can just buy your way out of this family? You ungrateful little. I'm not buying my way out, I interrupted. I'm paying my exit fee. I turned on my heel and walked toward the heavy oak door. I reached for the handle. Slam. Richard's hand crashed against the doorframe, inches from my head. He threw his body weight against the wood, blocking my exit. He was breathing hard, the smell of scotch and mint on his breath. You don't leave, he snarled, his eyes wide and manic. You don't leave until I say you leave. You're going to fix that dress. You're going to smile for the pictures. And you're going to do exactly what you're told. He was chest to chest with me now, his finger jabbing into my sternum with every syllable. You are going to get down on that floor. Jab. And you are going to be the daughter I paid for. Jab. Or I will ruin you. I stared at the vein pulsing in his neck. It was fascinating, really. For 26 years, that vein had been my barometer. If it was throbbing, I made myself small. If it was invisible, I could breathe. But today, looking at it, I didn't feel fear. I felt bored. I paid for. That phrase triggered something. It opened a file in my brain I had kept sealed since I was 18. The ledger of guilt. Richard didn't just give money. He invested in assets. And assets were expected to yield returns. That $28,000 for my freshman year hadn't been a gift. It was a predatory loan with a compounding interest rate of total servitude. I remembered my sophomore year, eating expired tuna cans in a basement apartment with no heat because I was too terrified to ask for help with rent. I had 3 jobs. My hands were cracked from scrubbing dishes at a diner. Meanwhile, Richard was posting photos of Brittany's new Range Rover on Facebook, with the caption, "Nothing but the best for my princess." Richard grabbed my shoulder, shaking me. "Are you listening to me? I made you. I built this life for you. You didn't build anything," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You purchased a subscription to a fixer, because that's what I was. I wasn't a daughter. I was the shadow planner. Who negotiated the vendor contracts for this wedding because Brittany couldn't do math? Me. Who ghostwrote Brittany's college admissions essays because she couldn't spell ambition? Me. Who balanced Susan's checkbook every month so Richard wouldn't find out she was siphoning cash for Botox? I had spent 8 years working off a debt that I had already repaid 1,000 times over in free labor, emotional management, and crisis control. I had let them convince me that I was a burden, a cost center, a leech. It was cognitive dissonance weaponized. He had gaslighted me into believing that his bare minimum parenting was an act of supreme sacrifice, and my survival was an act of ingratitude. "I'm not fixing the dress, Richard," I said, stepping back, forcing his hand to drop from my shoulder. "And I'm not fixing this family anymore. You ungrateful little bitch," he spat, his face contorted. "After everything I sacrificed." "Sacrificed?" I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You didn't sacrifice. You embezzled. You took the credit for my grades, my career, and my stability while actively rooting for me to fail so I'd have to crawl back to you." Brittany finally turned from the mirror. The silence had penetrated her self-absorption. "Daddy, stop yelling. You're ruining the vibe. Just make her do it." "She's not doing it!" Richard roared at her, losing control. He turned back to me, his eyes wild. "You think you can just walk away? You think a check makes us even? I have friends in this town. I have influence. I will make sure you are unhireable. I will paint you as a thief and a liar." "Go ahead," I said. "Make the call." I reached into my bag again. "But before you dial, you might want to see the other piece of paper I brought." Richard laughed again. But it was a nervous, jagged sound. He grabbed the torn pieces of the cashier's check from his pocket and threw them at my feet like confetti. "You think you can intimidate me with paper?" he sneered. "You think you're smart because you saved up some pennies from whatever coffee shop job you're working? I own you, Farah. I own your reputation. One phone call, and you'll be lucky to get a job scrubbing toilets in this town." He was bluffing. I knew it. He knew it. But he was counting on the old Farah, the one who flinched at loud noises, to fold. I didn't flinch. I reached into my bag and pulled out the second sheet of paper. It wasn't in an envelope. It didn't need the ceremony. "You keep talking about my career," I said, my voice steady and flat. "You keep threatening to call headhunters. Please. Do it. Call them." I stepped over the torn check and held the paper up to his face. "But make sure you tell them you're blacklisting a lead quantitative developer." Richard squinted at the document. It was my W-2 from last year. A federal tax document. Hard, irrefutable proof. His eyes scanned the lines. Name: Farah Sterling. Employer: BlackRock and Vanguard. Then his eyes hit box 1. Wages, tips, other compensation: $352,400. The air left the room. It was like someone had opened an airlock. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the number, then at me, then back at the number. He was doing the math in his head. He was realizing that the struggling student he had been bullying for tuition scraps was making more in a single year than he had made in the last 5 combined. Susan, my mother, leaned forward from her chair in the corner. "What is it? What does it say?" Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. His entire reality, the hierarchy where he was the king and I was the peasant, had just been incinerated. "It says," I answered for him, never taking my eyes off my father, "that I don't need your money. I don't need your connections. And I certainly don't need your permission to exist." Susan gasped as she read the number over Richard's shoulder. "Farah? Is this real?" "It's filed with the IRS, Mom. It's as real as it gets." And then, the shift happened. I watched it ripple across Richard's face. The purple rage faded, replaced instantly by a hungry, desperate gray. The narcissist realized his victim was actually a resource. His posture changed. He uncurled his fists. He actually smiled, a grotesque, oily stretching of his lips. "Well," he said, his voice dropping an octave, trying to sound paternal. "Well, this is wonderful news, Farah. Why didn't you tell us?" We've been worried sick about you. He reached out, trying to touch my arm, trying to reclaim ownership. This changes things, he said, his eyes glittering with greed. This is family money, sweetheart. We invest together. With capital like this, we could leverage the business. We could. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that made him flinch. You think I showed you this to share it? I asked, stepping back out of his reach. I didn't show you this to invite you in, Richard. I showed you this to prove that I am completely, utterly out of your league. The smile vanished. The predator returned. But this time, he was scared. You ungrateful. Save it. I cut him off. I'm not done. You wanted to talk about money? Let's talk about money. Let's talk about where your money actually went. I reached into my bag for the third and final document. Richard's face contorted. The greed evaporated, replaced by the ugly, defensive snarl of a cornered animal. He realized he couldn't charm me, and he couldn't bully me with the threat of poverty anymore. So he reached for his last weapon. The law. You think you can just hoard that money? He spat, his voice shaking. I'll sue you. In Connecticut, there are laws. Filial responsibility. I raised you. I fed you. If you're rich, you owe us. I will drag you to court and bleed you dry for parental support. I was hoping you'd say that, I replied. I pulled the third document from my bag. This one wasn't a single sheet. It was a bound booklet, thick and heavy, with a clear plastic cover. I dropped it onto the vanity table next to Brittany's hairspray. It landed with a heavy thud. What is that? Brittany asked, her voice trembling. The vibe was definitely ruined now. That, I said, pointing to the cover, is a forensic audit of the UTMA trust fund my grandmother left me in 1998. The one she fully funded before she died. The one you were the custodian of, Richard. Richard went white. Not pale white. Like a sheet of paper. Grandma didn't leave you anything, he stammered, his eyes darting to the door. She died. Broke. That's the lie you told me, I corrected. But public records are funny things. She left me $500,000. It was supposed to be mine when I turned 21, but I never saw a dime because you told me it didn't exist. I flipped the booklet open to a page I had bookmarked with a red sticky note. My lawyers and forensic accountants had a very interesting time tracking the withdrawals, I said, running my finger down the column. You treated my inheritance like your personal piggy bank. I looked up at him. He was sweating now, beads forming on his upper lip. November 14th, 2018. I read aloud. Wire transfer. $50,000. Destination. Greenwich Country Club. Initiation fee. That was my money. Richard. I intended to pay it back, he croaked. March 3rd, 2020, I continued, ignoring him. Check number 402. $82,000. Destination. Portia of Fairfield. Memo. Brittany's 18th birthday. Brittany gasped. She looked at her father, then at me. My car? You bought my car with her money? He bought everything with my money, I said, closing the booklet. The renovations on the house. The vacations to Street Barts. This wedding. It's all funded by the embezzlement of a minor's trust. I stepped toward Richard, finally towering over him. You didn't pay my tuition, I said. You stole $500,000 of my trust, spent it, then let me use $28,000 of my own money and called it a loan. You never sacrificed for me. You robbed me. Silence fell. Susan cried. Brittany stared, stunned. Richard froze as I laid out words that meant federal crimes. Embezzlement. Wire fraud. Grand larceny. You can't prove intent, he whispered. Administrative fees. It was theft, I replied. And I want it back. That was when panic replaced humanity. Richard snapped. Instead of apologizing, he ripped his tuxedo, messed up his hair, and threw the suite doors open. Help! He screamed. Security. Guards and a police officer rushed in. Richard pointed at me, shaking. She stole my wife's diamond bracelet. I caught her, and she attacked me. The accusation stunned the room. Susan's wrist was bare. The bracelet was nowhere visible. Richard kept shouting, demanding they search my bag. The officer ordered me to hand it over. I emptied it calmly. Lipstick, phone, card holder, and the receipt from the cashier's check I had just given my father. No jewelry. Richard unraveled completely. She hid it. She's on drugs. I looked at the officer. Before you tear apart my car without a warrant, check the timestamp on the documents I gave him. I explained that my attorney had filed federal embezzlement charges at 2:14 p.m., backed by forensic accounting evidence. And, I added, pointing behind him, This venue has security cameras recording everything, including him tearing his jacket and screaming for help. Richard realized the trap. Then he lunged at me, swearing. The officer tackled him and cuffed him. Richard Sterling, you are under arrest. I walked out through a silent hallway of shocked guests, collected my Audi, and drove away without looking back. My freedom had cost me $28,400 money I had always earned myself. It was the best deal of my life.